Welcome back. It's still daybreak on Trust TV. This is the newspaper review segment of the program. And of course, as is customary, I will always have a copy of the Daily Trust with me. Front page of the Daily Trust. Lead story there says, why we accepted 70,000 naira minimum wage. That's according to Labour. Government must cut taxes for us to pay, says the private sector. Reps surrender salary, 50% salary over hardship. Cut your allowances. Atiku citizens tell lawmaker. And other stories there says, Senate moves to establish local government's election commission. Also, Kano politician Dambilki handcuffed, flogged for criticizing Kaduna governor. Other developments there say Israeli parliament votes against Palestinian states. And on the belt, Kenya win for Gen Zs as court suspends police ban on protests. Top of the page says, JAMB pegs cutoff mark at 140 for varsities. Page 6 has that story. And marketers publish daily landing cost of petrol. Also, stop blaming federal government for your failures. APC replies PDP governors. These are some of the stories scattered on the front page of the Daily Trust. We now go to the Nigerian Tribune. Tribune at the top of the page says JAMB approves 140, of course, as replicated on the Daily Trust, as cutoff mark for universities, 100 for colleges, polytechnics, FGOK 16 years as entry age into tertiary institutions after uproar by stakeholders. Also, gunshots, violence, welcome Shaibu to Benin after reinstatement by court. One policeman killed. APC, PDP chieftain, trade blames. Also, food sufficiency, Southern Governors Forum to promote regional trade, says Governor Abiodun Ndume. NAS becoming enabler of executive recklessness, says former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Also, close down substandard educational institutions. Afe Babalola advises federal government. A lead story on the Nigerian Tribune says minimum wage, organized private sector cautious as federal government, Labour agree on 70,000 naira. Minimum wage should be reviewed every 3 years. Why I intervened in negotiation, says President. We have accepted new amount with mixed feelings, says Ajero, the NLC President. President orders payment of withheld SANU, NASU members' salary. These stories are on page 4 and page 27 of the Nigerian Tribune. CBN resumes dollar sales to BDCs at 1,450 naira per dollar. Each BDC gets $20,000. And also, Nigeria's economy on path of growth, says Omokri. Over 100 psychiatric doctors left Nigeria in 1 year, according to the association. Now, these are some of the stories on the Nigerian Tribune, and we now go to the Vanguard. This story there says minimum wage, federal government, Labour settle for 70,000 naira. OPS lists conditions. We're accepting it with mixed feelings because of economy, says Ajero. Minimum wage law to be reviewed every 3 years. Tinubu to submit executive bill to National Assembly next week. We can't pay without federal government support, says organized private sector. NLC holds NEC meeting today. And also reps to expedite action on bill, says the speaker. And these are some of the stories that are captured on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. We now go to Daily Independent. It says mixed reactions show federal government labels 70,000 naira minimum wage. Workers say they can't survive on 70,000 naira as minimum wage. Accused labor leaders of compromise. Say this is a sellout. Analysts say increasing salary will provoke other market forces. Asks federal government to consider development of public infrastructure. Others. Tinubu pledges reviewing minimum wage every 3 years. Assures protest in Sanu, Nasu of payment of withheld salaries. And top of the page says 31 million housing units in Nigeria substandard, says housing minister. And JAMB asks varsities to admit candidates with 140 minimum score. And then, of course, at the bottom of the pictorial, we know promoters of planned nationwide protest, says federal government. These are some of the stories on the front page of the Daily Independent this morning. And now joining us in the studio, of course, to provide perspectives on these developments and these headlines, we have Dr. Andrew Ilesomi. He is a political analyst. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, the first question is going to be what your first thoughts were upon seeing the new minimum wage at 70,000 naira. Did the government finally do well?
Well, if you say they do well, there's
no, I'm not saying, I'm asking.
Okay, if let me, to my own, I think they are trying. They've started from somewhere. With time, like you said, every 3 years, I'm sure they will do so. It might not be okay, or it might not be all right, but it's okay.
But of course, there's the trust deficit that Nigerians have of the government in terms of making promises and not implementing them. So there's that issue. However, the Senate is now moving to establish local government election commission. It passed first reading yesterday on the floor of the Senate. Do you think that this would now bring the much needed financial autonomy and the much needed freedom that has been clamored for at the local government level, the grassroots, of course, government of the people?
Who is going to be in control? The governor of the state will still be in control no matter what.
I think they are clamoring for a federal structure, sort of, for this local government's commission.
Which is okay, which is a little bit okay. But I think whatever it is, it should still be controlled from the top. Because if you allow it to trickle down to the local government, the governor of that state will still be in control, and they will pocket whatever they want to pocket.
Well, that's indeed a challenge. But then again, JAMB pegs cutoff mark at 140 for universities. Dr. Andrew, this is a worrying development for me. Worrying in the sense that I knew the cutoff mark used to be higher. I can't remember the figures particularly, but I think it was somewhere around 160,
220.
So is this a cry for help in the terms of the quality of education that young children and young Nigerians are getting in Nigeria, to the extent that JAMB has to reduce cutoff mark for universities so they could admit students?
If you look at it, to me, they can still come down. I would want them to come down. Why? If you look at the number of children that fail JAMB, it's alarming just because of this cutoff mark thing. And if they leave the shore of Nigeria, whatever they get, they admit them. The adverts are everywhere. I think JAMB can still come down. Marks should be 100. But then they can review maybe the questions in either way. Because if you look at it, sir, the cutoff mark is scary, and we have a lot of children out there that are not being admitted. But on the other hand, it's also not okay for the mark to be reduced, because they might take advantage of such mark. And at the end of the day, you just find out that it's going to be like a garbage in and garbage out. When I start having children, all kinds of people that will just say, okay, let me just write because I know somehow I will pass. But I think if what JAMB is doing right now is very good. There's a lot of sanitation. There's a lot of improvement. There's a lot of things that are going on in JAMB that is making them have a better face. So this mark is all right, but not okay.
Okay, it's all right, but it's not okay. Well, especially in a situation when, you know, the JAMB score is supposed to be over 400, and if you say you're reducing cutoff mark to 140, the question of whether that is a pass mark now comes to bear. But then, like you said, it's all right,
but it's
not okay. Then let's quickly go out of the shores of Nigeria. It's a win for Gen Zs as court suspends police ban on protests. Now, the protest has been banned. And then coming back to Nigeria, there's, of course, going to be one coming soon. I think at the end of the month or the beginning of the new month. I can't say precisely. However, the Nigerian government is concerned. But do you think that this protest that these faceless Nigerians have decided to embark on is justified, especially considering the situation of things in the country?
Protest is good, but what are you protesting for? It's good to have protest. You don't have to go to the street. You don't have to vandalize things. You don't have to kill. You don't have to maim. But the point is, what are we protesting for?
Indeed, what are we protesting for?
Yes,
We're protesting.
At the end of the protest, we need to drive a message home. What is the message we are trying to drive home? The government should do. By now, I think the government's hands are really tied behind them, not in front of them. The government cannot run more than how they can run now. The government say, give us time, we will do this. I'm not in support of the protest. And on the other hand, it is good to protest. But what are you protesting for?
Well, they are protesting for an improvement in their living conditions, of course. First of all, the cost of commodities in the market has skyrocketed. A lot of families cannot. Well, all over the world, but some would say Nigerians are focused on Nigerian problems. So,
but Nigerians are quick to criticize their own nation, and they want to run outside to defend or to build another nation. Whatever it is, this is our country. We are in this country together. We can do it together. You don't have to go to the street. Do you know the number of people that will be injured? The number of people that will lose their life? If we take, for example, what is happening out there, I'm not saying we don't need protests, but we don't need a violent protest. We don't need protests that will lead to death or to any other thing. And I'm sure government is listening. Why did I say that? Governments are where they want to protest. Now government is saying, okay, let us cut XYZ, salaries and the rest. That is one point I think government has listened to them. They should also listen to. It's
listening, but then Nigerians are saying implementation has always been the problem.
Let's come back to 70,000 naira minimum wage.
Okay.
There's been up and down from maybe like 500, 400, 250,
indeed.
And at the end of the day, they met at the middle. The most important thing is that let us fight, but we'll now meet in the middle and have a common ground to operate. So the common ground for the government is that, okay, let us start with 70,000. In the next 3 years, this is what we are going to do. I think they have driven a message home for the people. It's not okay at all. The 70,000 naira cannot really buy anything. But with time, this is what we are going to. I'm not speaking for the government, but I'm just looking at, okay, what could have made them to go all night, the Ajero thing, the TUC. They came back and said, okay, let us agree with this 70,000 naira. By the time we get to the next 3 years, we'll come back again to the drawing board and say, okay, is it that way? Oh, definitely it's going to be, they will add, not that they will subtract. Because if you look at it right now, it is not all right anywhere. All over the world, everyone is crying. So if you say, okay, let us give them 250, there will be more inflation. There will be more problem. More money out there, nothing to buy. The purchasing power will now reduce. Again. The more you demand, the more problem it puts on the.
It might put.
Yes.
Well, while we talk about the executive and the implementation of the new minimum wage, of course, there's been critics who have voiced their concerns about the way the federal government has been taking some of this criticism. I mean, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has accused the government of exhibiting despotic traits. In his words, he says the National Assembly is an enabler of executive recklessness. What do you make of this statement?
I look at, somebody needs to check the government. You need the opposition for you to do well. So what Atiku is saying there, it's okay. perfectly, and it's helping the government. And maybe the government are not even looking at that direction, and it's pointing them to this particular as a goal. For you, it's recklessness. Can we do this so that we can get these results? But if you don't look at the points Atiku is making very well, you might read negative meanings.
So let me give you an example of why people might read negative meaning.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, in the course of the last 6 or 7 months, we've seen lawmakers who have been punished for their utterances against the federal government. We've had Senator Ahmed Ningi suspended from the National Assembly, if you can remember, over his comments about the 2024 budget. He says the federal government is running 2 budgets concurrently. Of course, we've seen what happened with the Senate Chief Whip, Ali Dume, who was recently removed, all for also saying that, look, we need to get it right, in terms of all of these things, going further to say that the government might be run by a bunch of kleptocrats, and this might be a kakistocracy. These people, these ranking government officials, have faced sanctions, penalties for these comments against the government. Do you think that this is now, in place or right for all of the critics of this administration to say they are not open to positive criticism?
When Dume started, Dume has been a senior member of this government. Dume has been there for more than 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken. Dume knows the system. Dume knows what is going on. He started by saying you cannot access the president. They've caged the president, they've done this, they've done that. From his own point, I don't know. From our own point, we are seeing a different thing. But I believe if it is not true, he wouldn't have said it. But going extra mile, I think that's what causes him his fault. He tripped down and fell. You understand? He's part of the system. He knows the system, and he knows why he's saying that. But like I said again, I think somebody needs to be checking the government. The government needs a backing dog that will make sure they are actually working. You understand? Like Senator Dume has been around for a long time. And what he said, I don't think is far-fetched from the truth. But I say, okay, government, this is what we are doing. This is what we are not doing well. And it's not excluded. But I think the punishment is a bit too high for him to be given that kind of
sanction.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
All right, then. With that, unfortunately, that's the much we can take on the program this morning. Indeed. Well, Dr. Andy is saying that it might not be far-fetched, of course, for Senator Dume to say what he said. It might be the truth, but then again, the sanction might be too much. The expectation of government to be open to criticism, especially when it's coming from the opposition or when it's even coming from a member of their own party, is quite important, and it shows, that the government is open to improving its processes. And with that, we have come to the end of Daybreak this morning. It's been, a long conversation from 8 a.m. until this point. If you missed any part of the program, do well to follow us across all of our social platforms and also catch our live stream on YouTube for more news, programs, and documentaries. From me is thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely weekend. And up next is 360 Sports with Emmanuel Fashimi. Do stay with us.